Hey there guys, we're taking a look at Call of Duty Black Ops 3 Zombies running on the AMD Ryzen 5 5500U. Now the game is currently running with the lowest in-game graphics settings that we could set it to, but we do have the render resolution set to 100% of 1080p. So this is what it's running at the full 1080p resolution with the lowest in-game graphics settings at the stock 15 watt TDP. Now of course this is with 16 gigabytes of RAM, and it really does make a big difference in terms of keeping those 1% lows at least consistent enough to be able to be played at an above 30 FPS average, with our averages hitting in the low 40s and 1% lows not even going under 30. Certainly not the greatest gaming experience, but considering that we are at the full 1080p resolution and the TDP is still set to stock, this is pretty decent levels of performance, and you can actually get away with playing like this, though it's definitely going to start to slow down as more things happen on screen. It's never really going to fall into unplayable territory. But of course, if you have a system that actually lets you adjust the TDP, you can try to do that to try to squeeze out a bit more performance, and we can see what pumping a full 25 watts into this APU will do to the performance. And you'll see here that raising the TDP up to 25 watts actually does a decent amount to raise the overall performance of the game here, where our 1% lows are now at 40 and our averages are really just shy of 60, being at 56. And overall, this does feel like a much nicer experience than where we were at before. And a lot of systems are going to be able to actually run this at the full 25 watt TDP. You would really have to have a very low end system that would not be able to handle at least 25 watts here sustained. Certainly having temperatures in the mid 70s is starting to push it in terms of what is reasonable, but these chips themselves are rated for some pretty high temperatures, and very few components are really put into any level of risk being near these types of temperatures. So for the most part, you should be perfectly fine unless you have a really cheaply made system. And of course, we can try to squeeze out a little bit more performance by going all the way up to 30 watts up from the 25 that we're at right now. And the 30 watt TDP actually makes the experience even better than where we were at before, though not by a significant margin. At least our 1% lows are now very close to 50 and our averages are above 60. So overall, this is the smoothest experience that we've had so far, though it doesn't feel worlds better than where we were at 25 watts. It is at least somewhat of an improvement, and it is noticeable in the experience. It just will not be something where I would risk your system just to get this level of performance. If you have a system that can actually handle this TDP perfectly fine, then go right for it, but I would not push your temperatures into dangerous territories just to get this, because if you look at the temperatures that I'm getting right now, they are in the mid 80s, and this is really not the kind of temperatures that I would like to play at. The system gets extremely loud at this point, and the keys do start to get uncomfortable to use after a while. So in general, at least for the system that I have, I do not recommend the 30 watt TDP, but if you are on a system that can handle it, you are going to get a nice experience. Of course, another thing that we could do to improve the performance is to drop down the internal render resolution. Now this is running at 80% of 1080p, so it is around what you would expect 900p to be. And at the stock 15 watt TDP, the level of performance that we're getting here is very comparable to where we were at the 25 and 30 watt TDP at the full resolution. So if you can't actually play with any higher TDP than 15 watts, I would definitely recommend dropping the internal render resolution to 80%, because you are essentially getting the uplift that you would see if you were just running at the 25 watt TDP. And really overall, it is a very enjoyable experience to try to play like this. And the best part of all of this is really that the temperatures and noise that this system is putting out is significantly reduced from where we were at the higher TDPs. So even if you have the thermal headroom, if you just don't want any noise or extra heat just happening, then this is a really good way to actually play the game, because the reduction in resolution I don't think really takes away too much from the overall experience of trying to play like this, and you really actually get a very enjoyable experience like this. Of course, we could also combine this with a raised TDP to see what that does to the overall experience. And going with the 25 watt TDP like this pretty much gives us an extremely smooth gaming experience, where if you're on a system with a higher refresh rate display, you're going to be able to actually start to take advantage of that. I know some of you guys have mentioned that you actually have displays that you can overclock all the way up to 75 hertz. So if you're on a system like that, you're going to actually be able to take advantage of that higher refresh rate. And especially if you're using an external monitor, you're going to get a lot of usage out of it, because you're at least going to be able to get into some higher FPS, though not by a significant margin. It's still at least going to be doable, and it is going to feel smoother. But if you're just going to be using the internal display, there's really no reason to raise the TDP, since we're now in ranges that are above what the display actually is. But if you want to keep those 1% lows as close to 60 as possible, this is a option to go with. And lastly, we have the 30-watt TDP, where you can see here that the level of performance that we get out of this is not too different from where we're at the 25-watt TDP. Overall, we are getting slightly better averages, and the 1% lows are still at a level where you're going to have an absolute blast playing like this. But the temperatures that we're at are starting to get into very dangerous territory, where I would just recommend not playing like this unless you have a system that can handle this heat. I would really just try to aim for target temperatures in the mid 70s, maybe even high 70s. But once you start to touch into the 80s, it's really not worth it, especially because this system at least gets extremely loud and uncomfortable to use. It does all come down to the overall cooling of the system that you have though, so it all just depends. But really, at the 80% resolution scale, the higher TDPs are just not that necessary really. You're going to be able to play perfectly fine at the stock 15. If you can go up to 25 watts, go right ahead, but 30 is just really pushing it unless you have the thermal headroom. But anyways, I hope you found this video useful. If you did, be sure to subscribe, and I will see you in the next one.